Biology is derived from two Greek words, bios and logos. Bios refers to life and being, while logos refers to a sort of telling of, or a story. Put together, that makes the term biology roughly translate to the story of life, or more accurately, the scientific study of life. Now, there are two very important words in that phrase, life and scientific. We'll discuss the latter a little bit later in the presentation, but right now we should focus on the term life. Many of us can already tell that the elephant and panda are alive, as opposed to a basketball or a paperclip. But how do we definitively show that these animals are examples of life? Or more broadly, what exactly is life? Living matter is distinguished through 7 properties and processes. There are quite a few, so I made an acronym, OGRE, to help you remember them. Homeostasis refers to an organism's ability to maintain an internal environment. Energy processing is the breaking down of food into energy. Reproduction is the ability to make more of oneself. Order refers to how smaller components work together to create a larger system, such as ourselves. Growth is self-explanatory. Response to stimuli can be thought of as reacting to an action. Finally, evolution is the core idea of biology that explains both the unity and diversity of life through random mutation. If all of these conditions are met, we can give our little bacterium, archivate, or whatever we're studying a stamp of being alive. Now let's take a deeper look at the highly organized structure of life. The biological hierarchy starts off in the global scale of the biosphere, which includes most bodies of water, land, and much of the lower atmosphere. Moving a little bit deeper, we find ourselves in an ecosystem, which refers to all the living, biotic, and non-living, abiotic factors in a particular area. In this case, we're examining a chunk of Eastern Africa. Going even further, we find a community, which refers to an array of living organisms in an ecosystem. Then we have a population, or all the organisms of a particular species living in an ecosystem. Next up, we have the individual organism. Each organism contains an organ system. In this case, I'm highlighting the cardiovascular system, which functions in transporting nutrients throughout the body. Each organ system, as you may expect, can further be divided into organs, such as the stomach. Getting super deep, we see that organs may be further broken up into tissues. As we'll see in Chapter 4, tissues are physically connected and interact with each other via junctions. Finally, the cell has a very special place in our ladder because it's the lowest level that demonstrates the properties of life. Now, as we swivel through the model, we can look through the organelles that compose a standard animal cell. Hopefully this may already give you some appreciation to how truly complex the cell is. Before today, the word cell may have just been a term, some useless definition that you are forced to memorize, but it's so much more than that. Biologists have found cells in every living thing on Earth. Cells are the literal reason you breathe, feel, relate, understand, and empathize. Let's explore it. Here we see 2 very long words. Oftentimes when looking at an unfamiliar word, it helps to break it down into its roots. In this case, we find the words pro, eu, and karyote. Pro means before, and eu simply means true. Karyote actually has a nice English comparison, kernel. This roughly makes prokaryote mean before kernel, and eukaryote mean true kernel. As shown by this image on the left, this nut actually refers to the nucleus of a cell. We'll talk more about the specifics later on, but right now the key idea is that the cell is a wonderful example of 2 very important biological themes, form and function, and the idea of a system. One prime example of the relation between form and function is the structure of a nerve cell. Its elongated axon allows the transmission of signals across your body. The second big idea is the idea of a system. Consider a bunch of bicycle parts. Alone, they are useless, but together, they can make a vehicle that's used for transportation. Similarly, the combinations of organelles helps the cell fulfill its jobs. But like any system, the cell is subject to wear and tear. Parts break, systems fail, and productivity halts. For this reason, the cell must be able to reproduce. This is done through the help of something called DNA. In the far left, we see a 3D model of DNA. To make it easier to examine, I made a sort of 2D cut of the single pieces, our monomers, that make up our mystery molecule. Understanding the chemical details are fairly tricky, so we won't, for right now anyway. The big ideas are that DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the chemical substance of genes, which are grouped into larger structures called chromosomes. During cell reproduction, or more formally cell division, these structures are copied and pasted into the daughter cells. Each monomer contains a ribose, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. Each base bonds to one and only one other base, as shown through the almost jigsaw puzzle-like format of the nucleotides. Adenine bonds to thymine and guanine bonds to cytosine. This bonding zip ties the entire DNA molecule together. Finally, DNA codes for the cell's proteins. This code is actually analogous to letters. Just like rat and cat are different in English, tac and tag code for very different amino acids. A few slides ago, we talked about the biological ladder. Here we examined the horizontal dimension of biology, known as taxonomy. Although living things share many qualities, such as being composed of cells and containing DNA, there are also many distinct differences. Currently, we have identified around 1.8 million species, and the number grows every day. In order to organize all this information, biologists have developed a three-domain system. Prokaryotes may be divided between domain bacteria and archaea. The main difference between the two is that members of archaea tend to live in much more hostile environments, such as salty lakes or boiling springs. In contrast, the eukaryotes fall under the domain eukarya. From here, they may be further divided into kingdom Protista, Animalia, Plantae, and Fungi. A general description of each would be as follows. Protist is a tongue-in-cheek way of saying it undergoes photosynthesis, but it's not a plant. Think of algae. Fungi are our primary decomposers. Plantae are, well, plants. They use spores to reproduce, unlike protists. Finally, kingdom Animalia would be the quote, traditional animals. Unfortunately, not every species is primed for success on Earth. Charles Darwin first proposed this idea of evolution through natural selection. The theory is held to this day and goes as follows. Organisms with characteristics better suited to their environment will inevitably become more prevalent in their population. Here, we take the example of a population of flies. So you see in week 1, the black flies and sort of grayish flies are about the same in size. But the red bird on the top left is looking for food, and it can more easily see the black bugs. So it starts eating those specifically. Over time, the white bugs become more prevalent. In order for theories such as evolution to even exist, we first needed a way of organizing and expressing our inquiries. This is done through the scientific method. Let's take the example of a light bulb. We'll start off with an observation. The light's not turning on. Then, based on past experience, we may come up with two potential reasons for why the bulb doesn't turn on. The filament is broken, or the bulb isn't screwed tight enough. These proposed explanations to our observed phenomena are called hypotheses. From here, we can make a prediction based on our hypothesis. Prediction 1, screwing in the bulb tighter will fix the problem. Prediction 2, changing the light bulb will fix the problem. With these predictions, we may conduct experiments. Notice in this case, the problem is either with the top of the bulb or the bottom of the bulb. Based on our results, we may finally draw conclusions. As it turns out, the filament was broken after all. This means that changing the light bulb does not falsify our hypothesis. Now, after gaining all of this information through data, there are two types of reasoning that we may use to interpret it: deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning follows from general ideas to specific results we should expect if those premises are true. And inductive reasoning follows from specific results to general ideas or generalizations we can make about the world. So, taking a further look at deductive reasoning, it generally follows the format if this, then that, this, therefore that. In this case, I use the example of being vegetarian. Looking at inductive, it generally follows the idea this, that, this, that, this, that, this must have that. Now, it turns out that inductive and deductive reasoning are actually very, very good test-taking strategies. For example, let's say the following problem occurs in a test. Which of the following organelles are shared by prokaryotes and eukaryotes? We have lysosomes, peroxisomes, ribosomes, and centrioles. Let's say I didn't memorize all the functions of these organelles and I don't know which is common between the two. Well, then we have a slight problem. Because you see, the traditional way that a student would take to solve this problem is to list the organelles that are found in eukaryotes and prokaryotes. And eventually you'd figure out ribosomes are common. But if we decided to use deductive reasoning, we may also see we just have a two-line phrase that helps us reason that ribosomes must be common. All cells have proteins, and ribosomes make proteins. Deductive reasoning is a very, very important strategy. And to succeed in biology, it's very important that you understand when and where it's important to use it. Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks.